Hi everyone, I'm Nafisa, the Digital Art School producer here at Hospital Rooms. I just wanted to give you a big warm welcome and thank you for joining us for today's session with Abbas Zahedi. I really hope you enjoyed today's workshop, and if you hang on until the end, I'll let you know how you can engage further with the Hospital Rooms Digital Art School community. You should have everything you need for today's workshop in front of you, so let's get started. Over to you, Abbas.
Hi, my name is Abbas Zahedi. I'm an artist and this is a workshop for Hospital Rooms Digital Art School. I'm a contemporary artist, so that means I make all kinds of different work, and sometimes it can be about anything or even nothing. And so instead of focusing on a particular style of art or a specific outcome, I'm going to be talking about creative processes and how to map them, how to draw them, how to explore ideas and feelings in your work. And then by the end of it, you'll be able to draw your own creative process and reflect on it and maybe change it and use it to generate work whenever you feel like. Okay, so to start off, we have a blank piece of paper and some drawing materials. This can be quite intimidating. It's still very intimidating for me to face a page like this because there's this expectation to create something that's going to be like a masterpiece. But maybe it's better to think of it as an extension of your mind, as a thinking space, as a space to just kind of draw how you feel. And it can be very simple. So often I'm just doodling and scribbling, and then with time those develop into other ideas. So I'm just going to draw a very simple scribble. And maybe you can see there's a pattern in terms of how it's developing. This, I would say, is a very simple example of a creative process. And I know I've drawn it this way, but the first question I would ask is, which way does it go? Is it like this? Is it like this? Or even like this? In your own way, you can kind of think of different shapes that it looks like, depending on which way it's facing. This looks a bit like a signature, whereas that looks like a rose, or maybe even a tornado. First of all, it's about maybe questioning everything. Does it have a beginning and an end? If you have it this way, it's more symmetrical. But if you turn it this way, now you can see that there's a line that starts and it gets more complicated until it turns into this mess. And so the answer to the question might be going from a single point to a messy place, or maybe going from a messy place to a single point. And that could be a very early idea of a creative process that flows from one direction to another. And in your own experience, you might have an idea that starts off here, but you want to add to it and you want to make it have layers and you want to make it explore different things. So you go down the line and you make it more and more complex until you end up with an artwork that is harder to decipher. Or you may start off in a state of chaos, like you don't know what's going on. And then you have this in your mind and you're trying to find what's the underlying concern or what's the idea that kind of feeds into all of this. So you have to untangle and you have to give yourself the time and space and going through that process the other way to slowly untie these knots and end up with something that might be very simple. At this stage, it might be helpful to see if your drawing has different sections, and maybe it's time to add some color. If I start off here, I can see this is one section, so I'll kind of block it off. And then I like coloring in like this. Like this is a thing I've been doing since I was in school, where like I use really strong edges, but like I fill it in very light in the middle. And it's quite effective at like, you can even do it in a crisscross, and then you sort of get this block of color. So again, like these solid lines. Really like think about engaging with like the paper, like how textured it is. And now you can see that the colors are having an impact on the drawing as well. And then for the final stage, maybe this will be appropriate. It doesn't matter what colors you use. I think the best thing is just to make sure that you can see the differences. So now we have these 3 sections, and I think at first it's important to like engage with it as a new work again. So why don't you try coloring in yours, and then we'll come back and look at them together. Okay, so now we have this creative process mapped out with a line drawing and colored sections. These colors, I just chose them randomly. It was very intuitive, but you could kind of give them a description. So when you look at the combination of red with this more messy section, it feels quite overwhelming. So maybe here there's something about a level of like intensity, and then this feels a bit more sort of like a thinking space. Like the purple, for me, I relate to it as like thinking or trying to work something out in my head. So maybe this is something where it's more in your head, and the intensity, you feel it more in your body. It's more of a kind of visceral response. And in this area here, it feels very mellow. So the choice is, which way do we go? Are we trying to go from an intense way to thinking or feeling? If I find myself thinking too much, I have to rely on my feelings. So it's good to have them in balance. And then to something more mellow. And maybe there's like a calm after a storm, or it could be the other way. So now it's time to do your own version. You can label the different colors with any words that you like. You don't have to use these words. You could even use random words, like you could call this potato, bike, and stereo. Doesn't make sense, but that's what we can do. Okay, so now that you have some colors and some words, we're going to put this aside, and I'm going to draw the diagram again. And this time we're going to use it to build on what we've already done over here. So it doesn't have to look the same. It's okay if it's a bit different. This will change with time anyways. The idea is that it's a process of evolution. So as you make work, as you understand your process, with time, with different experiences, things will change. And that's part of it. So in this instance, I'm going to color the line itself so that I have a bit of space to plan around. So I'm going to put the yellow in here. And if you don't have lines, if you've got blocks, if you've got squares, like you can use any shapes. I quite like retracing lines. And this way you kind of get in, you start kind of retracing your steps. And something that came quite naturally, now you develop a sort of awareness. And the last one is red. So yeah, you can just keep tracing, and a lot of the work actually is subconscious, you know, and that's why I think for me, making art is more about asking questions. Now we have something that looks a bit more like an artwork, actually. I wasn't expecting that. So now you can take some time to trace over your drawing with whatever colors you like. You can even change the colors. And I think the process of making contemporary art is more about asking questions. And for me, contemporary art is not about what's the latest or the newest art. It's about art that's relevant to today. So even very old styles of art, if they speak to something that is relevant for now, it becomes contemporary again. So time is really relative in that sense when it comes to art. So whatever you're doing, if it feels right to you, then that makes it contemporary. And in this case, I think there's a set of ideas which we can explore through this drawing to figure out what do we want to make. And also when we're looking at art, these questions can help us too. And this diagram itself will lend itself to exploring some of those more straightforward and maybe more complicated or layered parts of an artwork. So for the sake of straightforwardness, I'm going to start from here and call it the beginning. I guess it's important to think, is there a story to tell? So maybe the first point that we come off from is there a story, a feeling, or an idea? If your work is using narratives, they can be personal, they can be historical, they can be borrowed. You could overhear someone saying something that sounds interesting and you want to make a work about that. That's valid. It could be very intuitive, and maybe it would be helpful to have some time to connect with yourself or different parts of what you're feeling or thinking to actually get the ideas from your feelings as opposed to referencing something existing. There could be an issue that's really important to you that you want to share. There might be some information that needs to be out there, and putting it out as a form of art actually helps people to relate to it in a more important way than just telling them through words. Or the art could be just words on paper. If you want to work with a narrative, for example, you have different options. Your narrative could be straightforward. It could go on a line, a beginning, a middle, and an end. Or it could be random and mixed up. It could be a style that is called episodic, where things happen in a disconnected way. But the feeling that they create together is actually very interesting and very surreal. And art allows us to play with narrative in these different ways. So maybe take a minute now to select how you're going to engage with your work. Are you going to refer to stories, feelings, ideas? And is your narrative going to be linear or more random? Now that we have a starting point, we still need to build all of these layers into the work. And so even if you're telling a story, it's still going to have different feelings and ideas. So at this point, we come back to that and we ask ourselves, is there something very general or specific that you want to convey? And are there any objects or symbols that help to achieve this? Can be things from your everyday experience. And so actually thinking in this way starts to sensitize you to your environment. And maybe this way of making art is more about that rather than what you put into the page. So take some time to think about this, and if there are any specific feelings or objects, make a list of them. You might go back to your first drawing, some of the words over there. You know, this approach requires a lot of questioning, it's a lot of sensing, it's a lot of feeling, and in a way I think of it as like tuning an instrument, because we all have lots of different internal and external senses and experiences. So once we find a way to kind of connect between the two, you feel a sense of resonance. So whatever space you're in or whatever you're feeling, maybe these kind of questions can help you to find something that resonates and helps to actually expand that sense into a place that feels helpful and something you can work with, as opposed to something that's overwhelming. Okay, so that's that point. Now, if we go here, our third concern or question is to do with the actual objects or physicality of things that we have in the space. So now that we're paying attention to how we feel and the environment around us, we can start to think, what do we want to bring in that helps us to explore what we're interested in? So we can choose from various objects, images, symbols, in general, kind of clues that will give the work a sense of relatability, or they might make it more abstract. And so you don't want to communicate too much that gives away something specific. But the question here is that even if you want to refer to something like, say, a chair, if you want to have an image of a chair in your work, does it need to be a real chair? Or can it be like a stick drawing of a chair? Is that enough to convey what you're trying to say? Is this even a good drawing? I don't think so. But the point is, maybe this is a starting point for something else to occur. So in the order of things where you're bringing in these different elements, it might be helpful to ask yourself, does it need to look real? Can it look a bit silly? What does it mean if it's so simple? Is there a clue in terms of what you're trying to send across as a message through the work? So take some time to think about what objects or images you want to bring into a space, whether it's through drawing or physically putting them there. And don't forget, the paper itself is also an object. It can be drawn on, but it also has a materiality. You can even fold it. You can put it up in different ways. So think about this, and to what degree of abstraction or realness you're going to put these into the work. And if you're going to offer any more clues, like we said, you could even use text. So at this stage, we've thought about the story, narrative, feelings, and now we're making it more concrete towards objects, images, clues, and another space that you can offer a clue or a greater sense of what's going on is through the title of a work. So maybe now we can ask the question of, does this work have a title? Do we need a title? When you look at art, do you want to know the artist? Do you want to know the name of the work? Or do you prefer to experience it just by itself? And I think both are valid. So yeah, that's the fourth point to consider. Okay, so at this stage, we have an idea of what we're trying to produce in the work. And I would think about this point, where does the work go? What is the purpose of making this? Is it something to share with people? Is it made for someone specific? Or is it going to be something personal to me? And so all of these questions are to do with context, and contemporary art very much fits into this way of thinking. So if you see an artwork or make an artwork in this way, this is about the relationship between you, the page, and the space you're in. I think now we've talked a bit about space, let's talk about time. And I'm going to use this intersecting point to make a list of different things that convey a sense of time in the work. When you look at a work that's on a flat paper, maybe it doesn't evoke this sense of time. But it takes time to make work, and it takes time to experience work. So if there's lots of intricate details, then people might want to spend more time with it. If it's very small, they might have to go up close, and that requires time to look with very detailed eyes and try and pick out things that maybe you've hidden. If it's a very big piece of work, then maybe it can be taken in very quickly. So the scale of the work and the space and the kind of way that it's experienced, again, relates back to the body, the idea of how much time we spend with it. And also the notion that if the work visually has a beginning, middle and end, which like this diagram we can follow, but if it's more abstract, then people might be able to digest it very quickly, or on the other hand, it might become a more meditative experience where someone would like to sit with the work and reflect on it. So all of these are things that you can put in as a consideration of time. And one way to get people to spend time with your work is to put a chair in front of it. So coming back to the chair, maybe that's also part of this equation to do with time. So at this stage, take some time to think about time and how you want that to play out in your work. So there's lots more things to consider, but I'm going to end with something that I'm going to refer to as technique, which isn't necessarily about having skills. It's more to do with what is the place of technique and skill in the work, and what techniques are available to you within the scope of materials and medium that you're using. As I said before, in contemporary art, every kind of work is possible, from photography to video to performance to installations, working with sound, even poetry, writing, and drawing like this. So if there are techniques that you want to refer to or borrow, they don't necessarily have to be ones that you're good at yourself. You can collaborate with people. So it might be that you develop an idea for something and then work with someone else to implement it. Or the lack of technique might be a way of showing a certain free-spirited approach to your work and encouraging other people to try and do the same thing. So that creates a type of collaboration in the future. And so I would say this is probably the biggest question mark when it comes to trying to make a work of art. And it's actually something that you might find the answer to through everything else. As we said, time relates to questions around technique. If you do something very intricate, people will be aware of the amount of time it took to do that. So there's a relationship between all these points. And once you go through your process and start to develop a work, you can go back and tweak the different elements. And remember, this is just the beginning. You can do this exercise many times, and maybe your process will change over time. It could expand in all kinds of ways. So allow yourself to be curious about yourself. So this is a very quick demonstration of how I like to think about making work. And I'm aware that you're going to have a lot of these materials too. So there will be an online gallery where you can also display your work. And I'm very curious to see all the different creative processes that you come up with, and also the works that they generate for you. Thanks for taking the time to sit with making your creative process.
We hope you enjoyed today's workshop, and thank you so much for joining us. We'd love to see the artwork that you created today, so make sure to upload to our Digital Art School gallery that's available on our website. We also invite you to please complete the survey that's available, because your voice matters to us and it's crucial in helping us to shape the future of the Digital Art School, which in turn will help others find joy and healing through arts. You can find the links to both the Digital Art School gallery and the survey in the description below. Thanks again, and we really hope to see you for the next one.